The event takes place on the White House lawn, under a bright afternoon sun, with a crowd of servicemen and dignitaries in attendance. Flags wave and the national anthem plays, setting the ceremonial tone. President Donald Trump stands at the center of it all, shaking hands with generals, exchanging pleasantries, and engaging with the crowd. At the edge of the crowd, outside the seating area, Trump notices a lone Marine, Sergeant Daniel Briggs, and like others in the crowd, the Marine is standing rigidly, his uniform flawless, but his eyes reflect a deep, heavy emotion that draws Trump's attention. He steps away from the formal event, moving towards Sergeant Briggs, signaling something important is about to unfold. Sergeant Briggs stiffens as Trump approaches. He's used to the usual ceremonial gestures, handshakes, and polite conversation, but Trump's approach is different. As Trump stops in front of him, there are no quick formalities. Trump observes him carefully, not just as a politician, but with a more personal, probing gaze. Trump grips his hand firmly, holding it longer than usual. He comments, "You look like you've got a lot on your mind," prompting Briggs to reveal his troubles. Briggs isn't sure whether to speak out, especially in such a public setting with cameras rolling. He feels the weight of the situation but senses that Trump's tone is genuine, not rehearsed or political. After a brief pause, Briggs admits that speaking up feels out of place, but Trump insists it doesn't matter, encouraging him to talk. Despite years of training to keep emotions in check, Briggs finds himself beginning to speak honestly for the first time in years. He shares about his service in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, mentioning the sacrifices he's made and the losses he's endured. However, he reveals that coming home has been the hardest part. His wife had to leave her job to care for their son, who has cerebral palsy. Briggs explains how he and his wife have struggled with the bureaucratic, slow-moving VA system, and how long it took to even get a response from them. He mentions the mounting debts and how he had to re-enlist just to keep a paycheck coming, but even that hasn't alleviated their financial struggles. Finally, he expresses his frustration, admitting they are drowning and that the system has failed them. Trump listens carefully, without offering quick solutions. He recognizes the deep frustration and injustice in Briggs' words. He acknowledges that the situation is not just a matter of inefficiency, but a disgrace to the promises made to veterans. Trump makes it clear that this issue will not be swept under the rug, and he turns to his staff to take immediate action. Trump calls for his chief of staff, Tony O'Brien, to come over and make immediate changes to address the issues Briggs has raised. He orders an audit of the VA system to find every case like Briggs and get names, numbers, and reports that very day. In the midst of the gathering, Trump turns to address the crowd. He announces to everyone that today marks the beginning of real change for veterans like Sergeant Briggs, and the government will no longer overlook the needs of those who serve the country. He specifically mentions Briggs' case, highlighting the brokenness of the system and the urgent need to make things right for veterans, their families, and their future. The crowd falls silent as Trump makes the bold declaration. Many of the dignitaries visibly shocked by the sudden shift from a routine ceremony to an emotional, public promise. Some of the military personnel begin to murmur in approval, while others exchange glances, unsure of what this commitment will mean in practice. At first, Briggs is stunned by Trump's bold declaration. He's unsure whether it's just another political statement or a genuine attempt to change things. Trump, sensing this, locks eyes with him and reassures him. "You'll see the difference, Daniel. It's time to act." Briggs, emotional and skeptical, nods but doesn't fully believe it yet. Immediately after the public statement, Trump gathers his inner circle chief of staff, military advisors, and veteran affairs specialists in a private meeting right there on the White House lawn. The room buzzes with urgency as Trump orders the creation of a task force dedicated solely to investigating the systemic failures within the VA and ensuring every veteran's case is handled with respect and efficiency. The press jumps on the story quickly, cameras flashing and reporters swarming. Trump's commitment to address the issues raised by Sergeant Briggs becomes the lead story. News outlets begin questioning the viability of such sweeping changes and whether Trump's words will translate into real action, or if it's just another moment of political theater. Behind the scenes, staff at the VA system are caught off guard by the president's sudden directive. The normally slow-moving bureaucracy begins to shake. calls and emails flood in as senior officials scramble to respond to the president's directive and begin searching for solutions. While the political storm brews around him, Sergeant Briggs feels conflicted. He knows the attention he's receiving could bring positive change, but he remains deeply concerned for his family and whether it will truly help his situation. Briggs continues to fight his personal battles with the VA and his family's financial troubles, feeling a mix of hope and doubt. As days pass, Trump decides to make a highly unusual move. The visit is symbolic, showing his commitment to backing up his words with action. It's not just about promises. It's about showing that he's there for the families of veterans, not just the veterans themselves. As Trump pushes for changes, there's increasing resistance from within the ranks of Congress, some of whom feel the issue is too politically charged or financially burdensome to address head-on. As the media frenzy continues, the public's response is mixed. On social media, veterans and their families voice their support for Trump's commitment, praising his direct involvement and his personal attention to Sergeant Briggs' case. The polarizing opinions on both sides fuel an intense debate across the country, with some advocating for immediate reform and others skeptical of the president's ability to follow through. On Capitol Hill, members of Congress from both parties begin to voice their concerns. While some express tentative support for addressing the VA system's flaws, others resist, arguing that the proposed changes would be too costly and could disrupt existing programs. In private meetings, some influential lawmakers push for a watered-down version of Trump's plan, proposing more gradual reforms that would avoid shaking the system to its core. Behind the scenes, lobbyists representing contractors who profit from the VA system's inefficiencies intensify their efforts, lobbying lawmakers to block Trump's proposal or delay action. As the political machinery churns around him, Sergeant Briggs' personal situation becomes more dire. His family's financial strain worsens, and his ongoing battle with the VA system continues to drag on. With little tangible progress in sight, Briggs becomes disillusioned by the promises being made, feeling increasingly isolated as the public spotlight fades from his case. He struggles with feelings of betrayal, questioning whether his sacrifice has been in vain. Behind closed doors, Trump's staff begins to feel the pressure of the commitments he's made. The task force that was swiftly assembled faces logistical and political challenges, as bureaucrats within the VA push back against what they view as an overzealous push for change. Senior advisors privately express doubts about whether the pace of reform can be sustained, especially as the political pushback from Congress grows louder and louder. Despite this, Trump remains steadfast in his resolve, holding his team to the goal of immediate reform, ordering daily reports on the progress being made. As Briggs' case continues to unfold, he inadvertently becomes the face of the veteran struggle, representing not just his own hardships, but the broader systemic failures that so many veterans face. Advocacy groups rally behind him, organizing protests and petitions demanding that the promises Trump made be fulfilled. The national conversation shifts more sharply toward veteran rights and reform, with grassroots efforts gaining traction and amplifying the voices of those who feel left behind. The VA task force, though beset by challenges, begins making some headway. Several high-profile cases, like that of Sergeant Briggs, are taken on with urgency, drawing public attention. New initiatives are proposed to streamline claims processing and reduce bureaucratic red tape. These efforts, while still in early stages, show potential for real improvement. As the reforms begin to take effect, Briggs finds himself drawn back into the process. He's invited to sit on advisory panels and task forces to monitor the progress of the changes within the VA system. While some veterans see this as a chance for Briggs to help ensure that the reforms are fully realized, others view it with skepticism, questioning whether his involvement is merely a way for Trump to use him as a figurehead. Briggs, despite the scrutiny, works tirelessly to ensure that the changes are implemented correctly. He personally visits VA facilities and speaks to veterans about their experiences, using his influence to highlight areas where progress is either too slow or incomplete. The compromise reforms face significant opposition from both the left and the right. Conservative critics argue that the reforms don't go far enough, while liberal critics point to the compromises made on funding and resources. Trump faces a political challenge as his supporters demand more from him. while his detractors accuse him of selling out veterans for political expediency. After his brief retreat from the public eye, Briggs begins to focus more on his personal well-being. He spends more time with his family, reconnecting with them after the strain of the campaign for reform. During this time, Briggs becomes more vocal about the importance of mental health care for veterans, realizing that his own struggles could serve as a platform to further push for mental health support within the VA. As the political and media landscape shifts, the national focus begins to move away from the veteran reform issue. Trump's opponents seize on other issues, and Briggs, while still an advocate for veterans, starts to see the attention on the VA reforms wane. Despite the progress made, Briggs is faced with the sobering reality that the momentum of his advocacy has slowed. As the next election cycle begins, Trump's team works to incorporate veterans' issues into his re-election campaign. He touts the reforms he has supported, claiming that his administration is making real progress for those who served in the military. After years of public advocacy, Briggs decides to take a step back from the national stage. He quietly resigns from some of the advisory panels he has been a part of and returns to his family life, though still keeping an eye on the progress of veterans' reforms. The reforms, though limited, continue to evolve under the leadership of various veterans organizations and advocates. While some changes are implemented, there's still a long way to go. The pace of reform remains slow, and many veterans continue to face the challenges they've always known. The VA system remains a work in progress, with some successes and significant setbacks. Lawmakers continue to debate the scope of future reforms, with veterans advocates like Briggs ensuring that the issue remains on the political agenda, albeit at a lower intensity. While Briggs steps away from the political spotlight, his advocacy for veterans' rights remains a crucial part of his legacy. The reforms, though not as sweeping as many had hoped, are viewed as a starting point. His work in pushing for faster claims processing, mental health support, and a more efficient VA system continues to influence the dialogue around veterans' care. As Briggs retreats into his private life, he finds solace in knowing that his efforts were not in vain, even if they did not lead to immediate, large-scale changes. The emotional toll and political battles he endured take a backseat to the realization that his personal sacrifices and tireless advocacy helped initiate a much-needed conversation. The VA system continues to evolve slowly. Some improvements in claims processing and mental health services are visible, though the agency remains burdened by inefficiencies and resistance to change. While some veterans see these changes as progress, others remain frustrated by the lingering problems. Advocates, like Briggs, continue to work behind the scenes, ensuring that the issue stays on the political agenda. The momentum for reform, while not as intense as during the peak of Briggs' advocacy, remains alive through grassroots efforts and continued public awareness. Trump's involvement in veterans reform becomes a key part of his political legacy, though it is met with mixed reactions. Supporters of the reforms view his actions as a significant step forward, while critics argue that he failed to deliver the sweeping changes promised. The compromises made during the legislative process are seen as necessary steps, but the question of whether more could have been done lingers. Ultimately, Briggs' decision to take a step back from the public life he once led is both an act of self-care and a recognition that the journey he embarked on has come to a natural, albeit uncertain, pause. He returns to his family, focusing on rebuilding relationships and finding peace after years of constant battle. While his voice may no longer be as prominent in the fight for veterans' rights, his role in advancing the conversation about veterans' care remains an indelible part of the story. The final note of the story is one of persistence. The fight for comprehensive, lasting reform within the VA system continues, but it is clear that true change will require time, effort, and the dedication of individuals like Briggs, people who are willing to sacrifice their own well-being for the good of others. In the end, while Briggs steps away, his work leaves a lasting impact. The seeds he helped plant continue to grow, and the conversation around veterans' care remains ongoing. A reminder that while progress may be slow, it is always possible when people are determined to make a difference.